Hello, dear friends. Welcome to the show. I almost wanted to say welcome to my room or to my office or come into my house. Settle back, relax, and let's have a chat. You know, that kind of thing. That's the way I feel about it. It's just like we're sitting there on my sofa and we're interacting, and I get to give you a piece of my mind, which I really love doing, and you get a chance to give me a piece of yours, which I'm looking forward to. And not only that, it's really what makes this show go. The callers. So I give my 2 cents here at the beginning of the show, and then you get to pitch in, and we go back and forth. Did I mention that this is Stand to Reason, and I'm Greg Koukl, your host? And, of course, as always, glad to be with you. One of the reasons that I like what I do and I like this show is because it fulfills for me a what feels a bit like a primal desire. And when I was a kid, I'm thinking in fourth grade, I loved it. Was it fourth grade or third? No, it was fourth, fifth, sixth, seventh, eighth. Yeah, it was fourth grade, St. Alphonsus School in Prospect Heights, Illinois. Yes, Roman Catholic. And we got to take turns reading. And I always couldn't wait for my turn because I just wanted to read aloud. And I don't think it was, I'm the star, I'm the center of attention as much as I just liked being able to articulate, to verbalize well in front of other people. I thought I was a fairly good reader, and so I wanted to be able to show, hey, look, I can handle this. And later on, after many years later, when I became a follower of Christ, my first discipler, and really my main discipler, my foundational discipler, Craig Englert, used to call me the quiz kid. I was always, because, I'm probably the kind of kid that was in the front of the class always sticking my hand up. So whatever that is, it's part of me. It's kind of deep down in there, been around for a while, and I found a way to make a living at it and be able to help other people and make hopefully a meaningful contribution for the kingdom, and I'm glad to be able to do that. It brings up another issue, though, and I hadn't thought about, excuse me, I hadn't thought about this, but I never felt led to start Stand to Reason. In fact, I never felt led to do hardly anything. That is, I'm not taking my cues from feelings that I decipher as being God, nudging, hinting, and the like. I think God made me with my natural capabilities, then added spiritually empowered capabilities in terms of spiritual giftings, and the whole of me is to be useful for the kingdom, and that is what I surrender. Peter says in 1 Peter 4, I'm going to paraphrase here because I don't remember exactly how it goes, but you can go back there yourself. As you have a gift, use it. Use it by the power God gives you. Use it as a good steward. Use it to the glory of God, but get out there and use it. You don't have to sit around thinking, well, what is God's will for me? I'll tell you what God's will for you is. It's to be useful in the kingdom. And whatever you have available to you at the moment, go do that, bloom where you're planted, and then see what God does after it. And if it might be that if you're faithful enough in small things, then he'll give you some bigger things to be faithful in. But that, I think, is the biblical model. Again, that's a different issue. I was teaching on this in Anchorage about a week and a half. Did create a week and a half ago. I wasn't teaching for a week and a half, though some might have thought it felt that way. But created a bit of a stir, but that's all right. Got people thinking. And in any event, I have this natural thing going on in me, and found a way to make use of it, hopefully supercharged by whatever God chooses to add, which makes all the difference, obviously. But that's his job. He's 100% responsible for his side of the ledger. I'm 100% responsible for my side, and I'm trying to do it. We have 10 ambassador virtues in the Ambassador's Creed. If you have the tactics book, it's on the last page of the text. You can find it, I think, right there in a drop-down menu at str.org. But when you look at these virtues, they are all virtues that require some action of sorts from you. They're virtues that you have. For example, the first one is that an ambassador is ready. That is, he's prepared, or she's prepared, and he won't back down from a challenge, looks for opportunities, and won't be beat up by the same challenge twice. That is, if he doesn't have the answer the first time, okay, got it. Second time around, that's a little bit different. Now, these are generalizations. I've been asked questions that I haven't been able to answer. Sometimes I can't figure out the answers. Sometimes they're so arcane I don't have the time to get to them. But you know what I'm talking about here. And another one is that he's fair. An ambassador is fair. And on down the line, I took my cue from the Boy Scouts virtues. They had the list of virtues that Boy Scouts were supposed to remember. I was pausing to see if I could remember from when I was a Boy Scout. In any event, I liked that idea that there were 10 things that would be characteristic of me as a follower of Christ, and therefore I made this list that hopefully will encourage others to follow as well. The last one, though, is dependent. That is, the ambassador understands that he is most effective when he joins his best efforts with God's grace. So we are dependent upon God, but it's not 100% God and 0% me. It is 100% God and 100% me. God does all of his job, and by the way, he can be counted on to do his part. But we have a part to play too. And I want to pony up, make sure that I do my responsibility as well. I don't know that I put in 100%, but that's our responsibility. And all the other things are on the list are things we do, and then we do them, number 10, in dependence on God. And then let God sort it out. So I get questions a lot from parents about how can I have a godly impact on my young person. I don't use the word teenager. My grammar schooler, my middle schooler, my high schooler, my child, my young adult. How can I have a good impact on it? We've talked about these things before, and please get it. I'm no expert in this. I have a 9 and a 6 myself, 2 daughters, soon to be 10, and what's 6 plus 1 is 7. Let's see. And in 3 weeks, the 6 will go to 7, and 2 weeks and 2 days after that, 2 days after Christmas, the 9 will go to 10. I am always thinking, or let me put it this way, I am consistently mindful of how I can have a strategic impact in the life of my daughters. I know this, that this is important and I want to do it, but I, like you, struggle with ways to accomplish that end. I actually got a very nice letter from somebody, here it is, talking about that. Let me just read it. Again, affirming that I am not an expert in this, and I'm picking up things and trying to pass them on to you so that in the process we can kind of struggle ahead and forge our way forward as ambassadors for Christ ourselves. It's a herky-jerky process. It is not tidy. And help our children to grow, which is also a herky-jerky process, is not tidy. It certainly isn't tidy in my life. Anyway, here's a note. From a fellow named Joe, and he says, not really a question, but a thank you. As a husband and a father of now almost 5 kids, I find it hard to have time to keep up everything. Life here in SoCal that would be Southern California, is busy. Putting food on the table, you spend a lot of time on the freeway. Putting food on the table is always a struggle. I've been greatly encouraged by the resources you guys have made available, not only directly from you, but also some of the guest speakers on your show, which have led me to to finding answers that I need to continue to grow in my ability to stand for Christ in a society that is growing more and more intolerant to the gospel, at least the biblical one. Good distinction there, Joe. He continues, we all need to grow in our ability to hold our ground and make advances in the areas God has placed all of us. I find it hard to make time to read large volumes of books, so things like your podcast and tactics on CD are great for guys like me who struggle with their time. That's me too. Then he puts in parentheses devotions, long work hours, commutes, dishes, diapers, baths, date nights with the wife. And I know some of you guys are thinking, what's that? Fellowship, etc. He closes, thank you for your ministry and for making these resources available. You guys have directly and indirectly helped me regain my confidence and increase my boldness once again. Well, we're really glad to hear that, Joe. Really glad that we are in this together, aren't we? And as I've been saying, I think it's going to get a little harder as time goes on, maybe a lot harder, I don't know. But it's better we tighten our belts right now. And that includes for our kids. And so that's why I was really happy to see this article in the Huffington Post, of all places, a kind of a left-wing rag, that is newspaper. Lots of times I find things I can respond to that I'm responding to. Here I'm celebrating this one. The piece is titled, The Number One Reason Teens Keep, well, there's that word, but it's in the title. Teens keep the faith as young adults. Actually, the title says, Number One Reason Teens Keeps the Faith as young adults. That's a grammatical error in the headline. On the internet, didn't anybody catch this and fix it? Okay, never mind. Here's what it says. This is written by David Briggs, who is not responsible for the misspelling in the headline, by the way. The Holy Grail for helping youth remain religiously active as young adults. What do you think it is? The Holy Grail. In fact, this is so important that later on in the article, they say that the correlation is borderline deterministic. You get this right, your kids are going to be religious. Now, I don't think they're making distinctions here between particular kinds of religious. They're looking at at what it is that sustains the spiritual lives of young people into young adulthood. And we all know that there is a mass exodus once children, young people reach that age. And the exodus may be reversed in some measure a few years later after they get back from school and start having kids. That's another issue. Better they don't leave to begin with, right? The Holy Grail for helping youth remain religiously active as young adults has been at home all along. One word. Parents. Mothers and fathers who practice what they preach and preach what they practice are far and away the major influence related to adolescents keeping the faith into their 20s, according to new findings from a landmark study of youth and religion. Now, I think this is the study from Christian Smith, University of Notre Dame sociologist. He wrote, what is the name of that book he put out? Soul Searching? That's it, in 2005. And many of you might recognize the phrase moralistic therapeutic deism, being the way he sums up the spiritual life of many young Christians. Fairly shallow is what he means. But this same study that was conducted in 2002 through 2006 or whatever, or no, not 6, 2004, over those 2 years. Now they're looking at these same subjects they studied, and they're checking on what's happening now years later. So more and more details are coming out of this landmark study. Just 1%, the article says, of teens. Now, just mark this, all right? 1% of teens ages 15 to 17, raised by parents who attach little importance to religion, were highly religious in their mid to late 20s. I mean, just look at the numbers. Do you see how hard it is to rescue a kid who has not been brought up and had a foundation laid in some significant way? 1%. So that's the college thing. You want to get the kids in college? You can get them, but they're hard. Let's see. So less than 1% from parents who were not religious. In contrast, 82%, 82 times as many kids, 82% of children raised by parents who talked about faith at home, attached great importance to their beliefs, and were active in their congregations, were themselves, these kids, religiously active as young adults. There it is. Parents, 3 things. Talk about your convictions at home. Attach great importance to those convictions. Walk the talk. Be active in your congregation. 1, 2, 3, there it is. And University of Notre Dame sociologist Christian Smith, who led the study, says that the connection then between that and having religiously practicing children is, when they become young adults, nearly deterministic. If you are parents who are serious about their faith in word and deed, then your children are almost certain to be the same as young adults. It has nothing to do with sending them to youth group. In fact, the article says other factors such as youth ministry or clergy or service projects or religious schools pale in comparison. Oh, I'll just send them to a Christian school, send them to youth group. Here's $10 for pizza. Forget about it. Indeed, the article says that many parents have fallen prey to what are referred to as cultural scripts that discourage parents from taking an active role in the spiritual lives of their teens. And one of them is the cultural message that encourages parents to turn their children over to the experts. Hey, you're the pros. You're the youth group leader. You're the pastor. You're the teacher. You run the Sunday school. You're clergy. We pay you to do that job. Get going. Straighten my kid out. The article continues, for their part, parents need to realize a hands-off approach to religion has consequences. Parents, quoting now Smith, Christian Smith, parents, for better or worse, are actually the most influential pastors of their children. Parents are kind of glass ceiling of religious commitment above which their children rarely rise, close quote. All right, there it is. You want your kids to follow the Lord? You follow the Lord. You want your kids to believe true things? Then you teach them true things. You want them to be a consistent member of a meaningful religious community? Then you need to be a consistent member of a meaningful spiritual community. And the results will be, quote, nearly deterministic, close quote. Now, there are a lot more details you can fill in, but boy, that's it. That really covers a lot of bases. And we're here, friends. We're going to keep feeding you the next 10 years. Already made a commitment to this. Feeding you more things here on the show through our website that I'm doing, that Brett's doing, Alan's doing, other staff are doing, other people are doing that are really making a difference with their kids. We're going to feed them onto you. You'll have a smorgasbord. meaning you'll have a lot of things to pick from that you can begin incorporating into the lives of your children as you speak about your spiritual things in their presence and in your home. Most important, though, is you be people who are practicing and preaching. All right. Okay, I'm Greg Koukl. We'll get to some phone calls when I return here on Stand to Reason.
Each of us as Christian ambassadors faces two daunting challenges when trying to make a difference for Christ. First, how do we initiate conversations about spiritual things in a way that doesn't seem awkward? Second, how do we keep ourselves from getting trapped or overwhelmed by others more aggressive than we are? Well, that's what Greg Koukl can teach you in his book and DVD curriculum on tactics. Greg will teach you how to maneuver in conversations so you can create more productive dialogue with skeptics and challengers. Tactics are practical skills that Greg gives names like Columbo, Suicide, Steamroller, Rhodes Scholar, and more. Tactics are a way of engaging others effectively and winsomely, no matter what the subject. If you're tired of finding yourself flat-footed and intimidated in conversations about what you believe, if you want to increase your confidence and your skill in discussions, no matter who you're talking to, then Tactics is for you. Order Tactics in book, DVD, CD, or MP3 format at STR's online store at str.org, or simply give us a call at 800-2-REASON. That's Tactics, a game plan for discussing your Christian convictions.
Greg Koukl back at you here at Stand to Reason. And just point of information, the piece I just talked about from the Huffington Post, the number one reason teens keeps the faith as young adults. Amy said that article has been up on the internet for 3 weeks, and nobody fixed that. In any event, we always make the information available. So the next day after the podcast, so the podcast live broadcast is on Tuesday nights from 3 until, make that 4 until 7. 4 until 7, 855-243-9975, just for the record. Outside the U.S., we got a call from somewhere outside the U.S. last week. Where was that? We get from Canada occasionally, but this is Australia. That's right. Good day. 562-424-8229 is the number. But on Wednesday, the blog that goes up, Amy Hall's blog, has some summary of how the show went and what we covered and all the links to the things that I'm talking about. If you're following live, you can follow the Twitter because the Enforcer is on Twitter, keeping things going there and keeping you informed. So lots of ways that you can keep track and stay up with some of these things that I'm talking about. Okay, yeah, it's not the Twitter. Okay, I'm the twit that doesn't get the... It's Twitter. You know, I kept saying, I spoke to a youth group a couple years ago, right after this big thing happened with Chick-fil-A in Chicago. No, in New York. Then they had it in Chicago again, the same thing where they're getting battered and not allowed to open or there was a lot of resistance to opening up a facility there because they didn't have the right political views. So if you don't share our values, you don't work in our city. And I had been in the airport listening to this on CNN, and so I got to the event, and I'm talking to the youth, and I keep referring to Chick-fil-A, because I don't eat there. God bless them. I'm glad they're around, but I don't eat there, and I just didn't look closely at the emblem, and it says Chick-fil-A, not Chick-fil-A, and I couldn't figure out why all of a sudden a bunch of young people thought I was so humorous. They all kept chuckling. So it's not Chick-fil-A, it's Chick-fil-A. It's not the Twitter, it's just Twitter. All right, I get it. All right, and now I got Stephen from Yakima, Washington. Stephen, I'm glad you called. Hi.
Hi, Greg. How are you?
I'm doing all right.
Well, I just wanted to call and first off, before my question, just say thank you for your ministry and for all your work and everyone there at STR.
Mm-hmm.
I've been listening via podcast for 5 years and just gleaning the knowledge and the tactics with which you speak with people and think through different topics has been life-changing for me.
Wow.
So thank you so much for that.
You are so welcome, and it is really neat for me to hear that. I appreciate it so much, really.
Well, I'm glad. Well, my question is, I guess, let me give you a little bit of the scenario first. Is I've been a believer for about 7 years now,
Mm-hmm.
and I've been married for about 4 years,
Mm-hmm.
and or a little over 4 years. And my wife is about a year after we got married. My wife started having really bad chronic pain issues, and it's kind of evolved now to the point where even talking or even doing the most minimal tasks is extremely painful.
Right.
And so obviously it's very disappointing and not kind of not where I saw things when I walked down the aisle.
Right.
Not that my commitment is wavering. I know that till death do us part means till death do us part. But obviously it's very disappointing. I wouldn't say I'm in despair because I'm following Christ.
Right.
But when things turn out very differently to the point where we don't even know if we're going to be able to have children, there's a lot of despair, and I feel like there's two elements to it: an intellectual side to it, and then also an emotional side. And the intellectual side, I seem to be doing okay because I know that God works all things for good to Romans 8:18.
Right.
And so I'm doing okay on that, but I would still like to hear your thoughts on that. But it's the emotional aspect that just seems to be so hard to deal with.
Right. And oh my goodness, my heart goes out to you, Stephen. It really does. I am concerned that well, let me say this: what you're experiencing is not in the slightest bit unusual. And intellectual emotion doesn't matter. That you have to deal with that on both levels. It is not the slightest bit unusual. And part of my concern about the way Christians have approached, and I don't mean you, but I mean the body of Christ in general, has approached Christianity and conveyed things to people, has set a lot of people up for the emotional side of the disappointment to be much more difficult than it ought to be. A huge part of dealing with emotional challenges is perspective and point of view. Okay, and just think for a second. I got so much going through my mind, and I don't want to drop any of it. We're going to talk a little bit here, but I just want you to, because this is so critical. We're coming into Christmas coming up. I usually don't mention that word until after Thanksgiving as a general rule, but in something I'll note right around Christmas time is something I read almost every single year. It's an analysis of the two of the best movies of Christmas time, two of the best classics, and that would be It's a Wonderful Life and A Christmas Carol. And what this particular writer notes is that these lives were transformed completely based on a transformation of perspective, because not one iota in their personal lives changed. So perspective really matters. That is how we see things. And our perspective is many times something we absorb from around us. We're taught to see things certain ways and approach things certain ways. And in the body of Christ, broadly, there is a kind of triumphalism that is just simply not honest. And that is that everything is bright and cheery, and if you're really walking with the Lord, everything's going to be great. Well, I know people are going to say, well, we don't say it quite like that. No, but this is the way it's a lot of times represented. So let's have a praise report. And so then we hear about the things that people who had prayers answered. We don't hear about people who've been praying about the same thing, that weighty, difficult, egregious, bone-grinding thing for 10 years and haven't seen anything happen. And so there is this emphasis. I'm looking right now at Jeremiah 29:11, okay? Well, you're laughing because you know what I think about how this is used.
Exactly. I've thought about it many times.
Yeah, well, this is bad theology for New Testament Christianity, the way people quote this. It's the opposite of New Testament Christianity. Oh, I know the plans I have for you, declares the Lord, plans for welfare and not for calamity, to give you a future and a hope. And you're thinking, what? What happened to me, Lord? Now, people can say, well, ultimately it's not a calamity, it's some good thing or whatever. Well, look, that's not reading this accurately. He means a future and a hope in physical terms. That's what he's talking about. Okay, so clearly this isn't meant for us to seize out of its context, because what we read in Peter, for example, 1 Peter, why are you amazed at this fiery ordeal amongst you, as if something odd were happening to you or something strange? No, this is normal. In fact, I've spent a lot of time in 1 Peter, Stephen, in the last year. And I know a lot of it because I've just poured over it so much and just sat there in it and let that truth of 1 Peter, which is principally dealing with the issue of challenges and difficulties and how we are to manage things that disappoint us. I think disappointment comes largely because we expect one thing and we get another. If we did not expect one thing, then we wouldn't be disappointed when we get the other. Now, it's always good to have high hopes and think the best. And I know what you're talking about, when you make a major decision in your life, like marriage, for example, but a host of other decisions could fall in here, having children. And then it doesn't turn quite like you had imagined. Or as one had expected. And it might be health things, it might be personal, relational things. There are a lot of different things that could happen. And then this becomes a very heavy thing to carry. And so then the question is, well, then what do we do about it? And I think there are two things that we do. One thing is we have to, as a church, and that means us individually to the people we talk with, and then the more people say that, then the more the church is saying it. We have to tell people the truth. And this Jeremiah 29:11 theology is just not sound. It's not just bad exegesis, it's bad theology. It does not apply to Christians, period. And the reason I know it doesn't apply to Christians is because the New Testament says quite the opposite. And I just cited one example. Consider, that's 2 Peter 4. Consider it all joy, my brethren, when you encounter various trials, knowing that the testing of your faith produces endurance, and let endurance have its perfect result, that you may be perfect and complete, lacking in nothing. I think that's what God wants of us. That's where he's taking us. So that's in James 1. Go to Hebrews 12. All discipline for the moment seems not to be joyful, but sorrowful. But afterwards, for the one who has been trained by it, yields the peaceful fruit of righteousness. Now, how do I know these verses? Because I live them. And I'm not reading them. And I'm not lecturing you at all in your circumstance, Stephen. I'm saying this is what the church ought to be reflecting that we as Christians and leadership especially ought to be reflecting to the body of Christ, so that we have a sound understanding of what we're about here and what we should expect, so that we won't expect the wrong thing and then get disappointed. Does that make sense to you?
Yeah, it really does.
So far,
yeah, it's like I said, it's that kind of day-to-day grind of just pushing through the emotions, and when you come home and it's a bad day, and
mm-hmm.
it's that side of it that is just grinding away at me.
Yeah, well, brother, I can't get into detail. Just trust me on this. I am right there by your side. I know exactly what you're talking about. It doesn't mean that the things that are grinding on me are the same things that are grinding on you, but I just want to tell you that that's the case. By the way, I was talking to somebody else the other day who gave me a citation of a Spurgeon, and I found out this is just a wildly successful young entrepreneur, deeply committed to Christ and making sure that his livelihood is used for the kingdom. I mean, it's an incredible story. But then told me about something, a medical problem in his own life that I would never have, and I don't want to say any more detail than that because I want to respect his privacy, but I would never have ever guessed it. This was a buoyant person who had, buoyant because he understood the way things are and he had accepted his lot. But it was a very painful, difficult thing. And I mean, he would really relate to what you're facing right now. Let's just leave it at that in terms of detail. But he told me that Spurgeon once said that whenever you see a man who is publicly blessed, and this is true of lots of people, including this man, that is a Christian, anyone who has great blessing that is visible is probably carrying a cross in his private life.
Mm.
Nobody gets to see that. But that cross doesn't go away. That's the thing. And for each of us, the disappointments and challenges that we feel are things that they're probably, I don't know what God's going to do, but we cannot count on them going away. We should rather count on them being a fixed part of our life and then surrendering to what God is going to do through the circumstance. And I'll tell you how this is, in a sense, played out in my own life, as I have come to fix my eyes more on not this world, but the next world. I don't know how else to put it. I have a reasonably happy life. I'd say that. I mean, I can say that genuinely to you, even though I'm experiencing, have been for a long time, really significant challenges, just like you have. And no sense going into any detail. I'm just getting used to it. And in fact, when I saw the card here, how do you deal with disappointment, Stephen? The card's up here in front of me. The first thing that, and I don't mean this at all to be dismissive, but the first thing that came to mind is get used to it. I mean, I'm glad you're laughing when I say that, but that's the first thing that came to mind. Because if you notice here, if you notice when Paul asks for prayer, he never asks, and he does ask for prayer in different times. He's in prison a lot. He never asks for God to change his circumstances. He never says, please get me out of jail. Pray that I'm out of jail. And I think they did prayed Peter out of jail early on in the book of Acts. But Paul doesn't say that. He didn't say, pray me out of jail. He says, pray that in these circumstances I might speak as I ought to speak. Give me an opportunity for the gospel. Now, maybe his prayers can be different than somebody else's, but the point, I think, is that he is not asking for health, wealth, and prosperity, certainly. He's not even asking for comfort. He's not expecting that God is necessarily going to answer that. He's asking for the things that really matter, that in the midst of whatever this is, for as long as God allows me to be in it, that I bloom for Christ, that I honor Him, that I accomplish some important goal. Maybe you've heard me say this before. It's not so much about God's plan for our life as it is about our lives for God's plan. No disrespect to Bill Bright here. Great man, did great things, but I think that needs some adjustment because it puts, I think, the perspective differently. When our perspective changes, even if the circumstance doesn't change, then I think our attitude or our subjective side, our emotional side is the way you put it, can begin to change too. I can't say to you that I'm really successful at that in the things that I encounter over the years and I have to deal with. I can't say that I found the secrets. Stephen, glad you called me, man. Get a load of this. No, it's part of that whole process, because God is in the process of making our souls fit to spend eternity with Him. And this is an insight that I got from J.P. Moreland. I think it's a good one. And it takes us back really to the passage in Romans 8, that you, 8 verse 28, I think it is, that you cited only halfway a little bit ago in making reference to it. So let me give the entire citation. We know that God causes, those are two important phrases there. We know that God causes, He's an active agent, all things to work for good for those who love Him and for those who are called according to His purpose, and I'm counting you in that category. This is where people usually stop. And the way they understand that passage is God doesn't close a door, but He opens a window. I don't lose my girlfriend I mean, I'm going to get a prettier one down the line. I'm going to lose my job. I'm going to make more money down here. And these are the kind of testimonies you hear from people. And God does do that sometimes, but that's not what that verse is about. You got to keep reading. We know that God causes all things to work together for good for those who love him and are called according to his purpose. For those whom he foreknew, he predestined to become conformed to the image of his Son. That is, the promise that God has to work things for our good is not to change our circumstances, but to change us. That's the promise of Romans 8:28. And I'm looking now at 1 Peter chapter 1. I did turn to this because I wanted to get this right. Actually, there's a lot in here, but verse 13 of chapter 1, therefore, prepare your minds for action, keep sober in spirit, fix your hope completely on the grace to be brought to you at the revelation of Jesus Christ. You suffer enough disappointment in this life as a Christian, and hopefully you start thinking, maybe there's something more important ahead of me that's where my deep satisfaction is going to come from. We were not made for this life. We were made for another life. And Jesus said, in this world, you have tribulation. Chapter 2 of 1 Peter 21. For you have been called for this purpose. Talk about a contrast here, by the way, with the Jeremiah 29. For you have been called for this purpose, since Christ also suffered for you, leaving an example for you to follow in himself, in his steps. Arm yourself for the same purpose, basically, it says in another place. So, we are to, verse 23, Jesus did not revile in return. While suffering, he uttered no threats, but kept entrusting himself to him who judges righteously. Flip over to chapter 4, last verse. Therefore, those also who suffer according to the will of God shall entrust their souls to a faithful Creator in doing what is right. So here's my MO in these things. I am trying to instruct myself in my own Christian life that the color of the world for a follower of Christ is much different than a lot of people have represented it in the past. The resources that God gives me are adequate for me to carry on, and I need to toughen up as a follower of Christ, carry whatever cross he's given me to carry, do the best I can to allay the problems if possible, but realizing that this isn't the life where I'm going to get my full satisfaction. It's another life, and I can keep my eyes fixed more on what is to come, the revelation of Christ, realizing how things are balanced out here. And in the process, have my point of view, my mind renewed, if you will, in a way that helps me bear up under the challenge. I also want to commend to you, I've already talked a lot about 1 Peter. There's a lot there. I don't want to burden you anymore with the details, but 2 Corinthians chapter 4, Paul talks about his own difficulties and his own frustrations and his own discouragements. It's there quite candidly. He acknowledges the difficulty he's going through. We are afflicted in every way, but not crushed. We are perplexed, that's confused, but not despairing. We are persecuted, but not forsaken. We are struck down, but not destroyed. So he is looking at the trouble, but he knows that he's able to continue in Christ. And he ends the chapter with this famous passage, which is my favorite verse for a long time now, verses 16 through 18. Therefore, we do not lose heart. And it's easy to lose heart, isn't it?
Mm-hmm.
It is. I'm with you, brother. I am with you. Trust me on this. But we do not. Now, why don't we use heart? Now he's going to talk about perspective. Though our outer man is decaying, yet our inner man is being renewed day by day. For, And here's some strange words: momentary light affliction. And having read what Paul just described, and he describes later on in the same book, you think momentary light? It sounds like anything but momentary light. But this is comparative language. He says momentary light affliction is producing. It is the affliction itself that is resulting in something, okay? Momentary light affliction is producing for us an eternal weight of glory far beyond all comparison. While we look not at the things which are seen, but at the things which are not seen. For the things which are seen, those are temporary, but the things which are not seen are eternal. So there's a perspective for you. I haven't gained that yet. I haven't mastered it at all, but I'm reaching out, grasping for it when things get rough, and maybe that'll be helpful for you as well. I can't promise things. Which I jumped in on you. I was going to say I can't promise things are going to change, but they might. And God allows many changes to happen by His mercy, but there are lots of times the things don't change, and we change in the midst of it. And sometimes things feels like we could not bear anymore, and then we last another day or two or three or a week, and then a month, and then we're different. We're changed inside. But the challenges don't go away. So, what do you think?
That's good. I was reading those verses along with you when you were referring to them. So I'm gonna spend some time in those passages and can commit some of that to memory.
Yeah.
So.
Well, that's good, and I feel for you and for your wife and your family, and these are difficult burdens to bear. They are, and Jesus said, "In this world you have tribulation, but I've overcome the world." He doesn't say I'm going to take the tribulation away. He says I've overcome the world, and so He's there with us. We're not going to be ultimately victimized by it. We know that He is going to make the best out of it for us because that's what He does. That's what He's good at. That's how He was trained. Huh? Well, in Hebrews first couple chapters, we have a reference to Jesus being brought to maturity by the things which He suffered. And in the same way, we are going to be trained the way He was trained as well. So, all righty.
Yeah. All right. Well, thank you so much, Greg. And it was truly an honor and a privilege to be able to speak with you. And hopefully one day I can call back again.
Yeah, and it is an honor to speak with you as well. All right, Stephen, I look forward to the call back.
All right. Thanks a lot.
All
God
right.
bless you, Greg.
Thank you so much. I appreciate the call. Let's take a quick break, and then we'll come back for a short final segment this hour on Stand to Reason.
At Stand to Reason, we depend on the support of donors to carry on our mission to equip Christian ambassadors, and your non-cash donation items can help. You can transform your old cars, cell phones, or other items into ministry impact by donating them to Stand to Reason. Think of it. Because of your donation, Christians just like you will be able to effectively share their faith and change the lives of others forever. To make non-cash donations of all kinds to Stand to Reason, call iDonate at 877-897-4273 or go to idonate.com and visit STR's page. They'll take care of everything for you and Stand to Reason. Just call them at 877-897-4273 or visit idonate.com. Thank you very much for making Stand to Reason's work possible.
That was a great call, and I needed a little breather from that just to get ready for the next call. So that's coming from Craig in Jacksonville, Florida. Hi, Craig.
Hey, Greg, how are you doing? Thanks for taking my call.
Yeah, very glad to. I know you had two questions. You better give me your best shot here. Just a little tight at the end of the hour.
Well, one of them is less a question and more just some advice on being a good ambassador. But I'll give you the question first, and it stems from an issue of discussion that I had with my son. We were talking about the pro-life position and the basic argument, which is yours and that I hold as well, that abortion takes the life of an innocent human being, and
right.
Therefore, we should be opposed to it. And
yes.
he said, well, to be consistent, then should you not also be opposed to capital punishment? And I said, well, no, there's a distinction that's made because we're opposed to the taking of innocent life. These people have been tried by a jury of their peers and they're not innocent. And I said, so that's the distinction between those 2 points of view. And his retort to that was that they're not all the time, but he says, you don't have to search hard to find innocent people who have been tried and convicted, and then after, say many years on death row or whatever, new evidence surfaces that proves their innocence.
Right.
He says,
yeah.
if the possibility is there that an innocent person could be executed, then would it not make sense to just be opposed to it and just say, let them spend life in prison?
Right. Okay, let me respond to that real quickly. And I'm taking my cues a little bit from Dennis Prager, who's dealt with this issue, but I like what he's had to say. And the first thing he says, and I can't verify this myself, but I'm just letting you know my source. Your friend says you don't have to look far to find innocent people. This is false. This is just false. If there are innocent people who are executed, it is few and far between, and much more are the innocent people who have died from capital murderers when they are released into the public population. So if you're just going to count bodies, the body count favors the capital punishment and not releasing these people. Okay, so that's one thing real quickly. The second thing is that this is a liability that faces any system of justice. I don't actually, this is true about anything. There are always going to be the possibility that your system is not adequately discerning the guilt or innocence or whatever. And all you can do is the solution isn't to just not to act, or in this case, not to punish with a capital punishment. The solution is to try to get better at the process, which is what we've done. I don't buy this notion if there's even the slightest imaginary possibility that this person didn't commit it, that they shouldn't be executed. I just don't buy that. There's too much other stuff is at stake to let everybody go based on that possibility. Incidentally, one last thing. Maybe you could ask a person who says this, if you had the whole murder on videotape and you knew the person was the one who was guilty, would you think it's okay? No possibility of executing an innocent person. Would you be in favor of capital punishment there? I could pretty much bet you they're not going to go for that. So that means something else is going on here.
Yeah, his point of view was not that he was against punishment, but that he felt that it was better served to just save life in prison without the possibility of parole. That at least frees you up from the liability of killing an innocent person, and then in that way you'd at least be consistent with his point of view.
Yeah, if you don't have any good reason to believe that you're executing a good person, then there's no reason that you shouldn't carry out the punishment. And once again, I want to emphasize this is true of any kind of punishment. Yes, if a person is going to, what if a guy's innocent and he lives as for the rest of his life without the possibility of parole? He still is being egregiously punished for a crime he doesn't commit. And you might think, well, at least he's not dead. Well, maybe he doesn't think that's a benefit. I don't know.
Right.
This is a liability of all systems of justice and our limitations of knowledge, but it's a liability that can be, especially if you have carefully done jurisprudence, that can be pretty much eliminated. I just am not moved by that argument.
Gotcha.
All right. So I get in the last, we're actually, by the time we got about a minute and a half, literally. Are you satisfied with that answer, or is there anything else you wanted to say about it?
No, that's fine. Yeah, that satisfies me.
Yeah.
The other issue.
Go ahead. I'm sorry. You.
Well, I have an appointment to go talk to a state senator and one of my state representatives, and I'm trying to get them to introduce an exercise of religion legislation for the state of Florida.
Mm-hmm.
Other states have been trying to do it. I know the state of Mississippi just passed it. I know Arizona, the legislature passed it, but the governor vetoed it. And several other states are trying, but it's basically in the wake of the same-sex marriage issue. People of religious convictions are being trampled all over.
Yes, that's true.
It's legislation to try to protect them, and it's my wife and I actually, there's some work that we would like to do, a business that we would like to start, but it's in the wedding industry, and at this point in time, we're like, no.
Of course,
no
I understand entirely. By the way, it's too bad that we already have a law on that. It's called the First Amendment.
The First Amendment, isn't it crazy?
It's too bad that we have to pass. Why do you have to pass a Baby Born Alive Act? I thought babies born alive were supposed to be protected. Why do we have to have an extra bill to protect them? It's that kind of stuff. This is how crazy it's gotten.
I agree. But anyways, on the agenda, I've got 3 minutes to make my pitch, and I'm just, I'm nervous I'm going to blow it or,
How long do you do that? How soon? Is it within a week?
2 weeks.
Okay, call me back next week because we're just at the top of the hour now, and I got to say goodbye. Call me back next week, and I'll see if I can think about it a little bit. Just call early in the show. That's the best time, all right?
Sounds good.
And then we'll talk to you then, and we'll see if I can maybe suggest something that will be a help to you.
Thanks.
Yeah, okay, Craig. I look forward to talking to you. Thanks for that call. That's it for our hour, friends. Got more to come. I hope you stay with us and stand to reason.